S-P-E-A-K. Everybody wanna sing. Speak up. S-P-E-A-K. Speak up.
Sharpen your skills with this next listening session. Listen closely and snag every new word that floats by. Let's master your vocabulary. Unsheathe your inner voice and practice pronouncing each word. Craft a short sentence to acquire its meaning and lock it in your memory. Let's unleash your vocabulary potential.
Euripides. Playwrights were adulated like Olympic athletes in ancient Athens, and the next gold medalist was Euripides. He wrote about 95 tragedies, and 18 of them survive, among them Medea, Orestes, Electra, the Trojan women, Helen of Troy, Iphigenia in Tauris, Andromache, and the Bacchae. From a middle-class merchant family, Euripides was born sometime between 485 and 480 BC on the Greek island of Salamis, about 16 miles from Athens. He grew up as a skeptic, a humanist who believed, like the philosopher Protagoras, that man is the measure of all things. Euripides' plays use some of the same mythological material as those of Aeschylus, but the action depends more on human psychology than on what the gods decree. Some people thought the philosopher Socrates helped him write them, and like Socrates, Euripides was accused of being an irreverent firebrand. He put into the mouth of Medea words that he probably thought applied to himself. If you express new ideas among fools, they regard you as a trifling ignoramus. And if you happen to become more famous than the so-called intelligentsia, they will really hate you. That has been my misfortune. Some people think I am clever and they resent me. Others think I'm stupid, and they scorn me. Euripides relished his role as an iconoclast, and the prospect of his own death can only have been regarded as an unwelcome interruption of his productive life. True to conventional Greek beliefs, his Medea, learning that she has been abandoned by her husband Jason, longs for death as an escape. How I wish a lightning bolt from heaven would split my head in two. What good is there in life for me? None. There's nothing but woe. Oh, let me die and be released from this horrid existence. Not so fast, says the chorus in what seems to be Euripides' own voice. Oh, you reckless one, why do you long for that eternal rest that comes only with death? There's no need to pray for it. It will arrive soon enough. Never accorded as much acclaim as his illustrious predecessors enjoyed, Euripides won Athens' top prize for tragedy only 4 times, compared with 13 for Aeschylus and 20 for Sophocles. He was also unlucky at love, and both his wives left him for other men. He became a recluse, making a home for himself in a cave on Salamis. In 408, at the invitation of King Archelaus, he moved to Macedon and lived there in another cave, happy as a clam, until he died. How he died is a mystery. Owing to his unsympathetic female characters like Medea, Phaedra, and Helen, Euripides gained a reputation as a woman-hater, and one legend says a group of angry women did him in. Another story says he was torn apart by wild dogs while walking home from an evening festival. Probably he died in his cave around 406 BC in his late 70s of natural causes exacerbated by the frigid winter weather of Macedon. Euripides was buried in Macedon near an Athenian settlement in the valley of Arethusa. A memorial inscription reads, "All Greece is the monument of Euripides. The Macedonian earth covers only his bones, for it was there that his life reached its end. His homeland is Athens, the Greece of all Greece. He gave much delight through his muse, and is greatly esteemed.
In the past, the world was filled with the terrifying and unknowable. Diseases, disasters, capricious despots, the mystery of death itself. What we couldn't understand, we reimagined as myths and spirits. Over the centuries, though, we have managed, through science and reason, to illuminate the darkness. What was mysterious and forbidding has grown familiar and comfortable. Yet this light has a price. In a world that is ever more banal, that has had its mystery and myth squeezed out of it, we secretly crave enigmas, people or things that cannot be instantly interpreted, seized, and consumed. That is the power of the mysterious. It invites layers of interpretation, excites our imagination, seduces us into believing that it conceals something marvelous. The world has become so familiar, and its inhabitants so predictable, that what wraps itself in mystery will almost always draw the limelight to it and make us watch it. Do not imagine that to create an air of mystery you have to be grand and awe-inspiring. Mystery that is woven into your day-to-day demeanor and is subtle has that much more power to fascinate and attract attention. Remember, most people are upfront, can be read like an open book, take little care to control their words or image, and are hopelessly predictable. By simply holding back, keeping silent, occasionally uttering ambiguous phrases, deliberately appearing inconsistent, and acting odd in the subtlest of ways, you will emanate an aura of mystery. The people around you will then magnify that aura by constantly trying to interpret you. Both artists and con artists understand the vital link between being mysterious and attracting interest. Count Victor Lustig, the aristocrat of swindlers, played the game to perfection. He was always doing things that were different or seemed to make no sense. He would show up at the best hotels in a limo driven by a Japanese chauffeur. No one had ever seen a Japanese chauffeur before, so this seemed exotic and strange. Lustig would dress in the most expensive clothing, but always with something, a medal, a flower, an armband, out of place, at least in conventional terms. This was not seen as tasteless, but as odd and intriguing. In hotels, he would be seen receiving telegrams at all hours, one after the other, brought to him by his Japanese chauffeur. Telegrams he would tear up with utter nonchalance. In fact, they were fakes, completely blank. He would sit alone in the dining room, reading a large and impressive-looking book, smiling at people, yet remaining aloof. Within a few days, of course, the entire hotel would be abuzz with interest in this strange man. All this attention allowed Lustig to lure suckers in with ease. They would beg for his confidence and his company. Everyone wanted to be seen with this mysterious aristocrat. And in the presence of this distracting enigma, they wouldn't even notice that they were being robbed blind. An air of mystery can make the mediocre appear intelligent and profound. It made Mata Hari, a woman of average appearance and intelligence, seem like a goddess, and her dancing divinely inspired. An air of mystery about an artist makes his or her artwork immediately more intriguing. A trick Marcel Duchamp played to great effect. It is all very easy to do. Say little about your work. Tease and titillate with alluring, even contradictory comments. Then stand back and let others try to make sense of it all. Mysterious people put others in a kind of inferior position, that of trying to figure them out. To degrees that they can control, they also elicit the fear surrounding anything uncertain or unknown. All great leaders know that an aura of mystery draws attention to them and creates an intimidating presence. Mao Zedong, for example, cleverly cultivated an enigmatic image. He had no worries about seeming inconsistent or contradicting himself. The very contradictoriness of his actions and words meant that he always had the upper hand. No one, not even his own wife, ever felt they understood him, and he therefore seemed larger than life. This also meant that the public paid constant attention to him, ever anxious to witness his next move. If your social position prevents you from completely wrapping your actions in mystery, you must at least learn to make yourself less obvious. Every now and then, act in a way that does not mesh with other people's perception of you. This way you keep those around you on the defensive, eliciting the kind of attention that makes you powerful. Done right, the creation of enigma can also draw the kind of attention that strikes terror into your enemy. During the Second Punic War, 219 to 202 BC, the great Carthaginian general Hannibal was wreaking havoc in his march on Rome. Hannibal was known for his cleverness and duplicity. Under his leadership, Carthage's army, though smaller than those of the Romans, had constantly outmaneuvered them. On one occasion, though, Hannibal's scouts made a horrible blunder, leading his troops into a marshy terrain with the sea at their back. The Roman army blocked the mountain passes that led inland, and its general, Fabius, was ecstatic. At last, he had Hannibal trapped. Posting his best sentries on the passes, he worked on a plan to destroy Hannibal's forces. But in the middle of the night, the sentries looked down to see a mysterious sight. A huge procession of lights was heading up the mountain. Thousands and thousands of lights. If this was Hannibal's army, it had suddenly grown 100-fold. The sentries argued heatedly about what this could mean. Reinforcements from the sea? Troops that had been hidden in the area? Ghosts? No explanation made sense. As they watched, fires broke out all over the mountain, and a horrible noise drifted up to them from below, like the blowing of 1,000,000 horns. Demons, they thought. The sentries, the bravest and most sensible in the Roman army, fled their posts in panic. By the next day, Hannibal had escaped from the marshland. What was his trick? Had he really conjured up demons? Actually, what he had done was order bundles of twigs to be fastened to the horns of the thousands of oxen that traveled with his troops as beasts of burden. The twigs were then lit, giving the impression of the torches of a vast army heading up the mountain. When the flames burned down to the oxen's skin, they stampeded in all directions, bellowing like mad and setting fires all over the mountainside. The key to this device's success was not the torches, the fires, or the noises in themselves, however, but the fact that Hannibal had created a puzzle that captivated the sentries' attention and gradually terrified them. From the mountaintop, there was no way to explain this bizarre sight. If the sentries could have explained it, they would have stayed at their posts. If you find yourself trapped, cornered, and on the defensive in some situation, try a simple experiment. Do something that cannot be easily explained or interpreted. Choose a simple action, but carry it out in a way that unsettles your opponent. A way with many possible interpretations, making your intentions obscure. Don't just be unpredictable, although this tactic too can be successful, as you'll see in Law 17. Like Hannibal, create a scene that cannot be read. There will seem to be no method to your madness, no rhyme or reason, no single explanation. If you do this right, you will inspire fear and trembling, and the sentries will abandon their posts. Call it the feigned madness of Hamlet tactic, for Hamlet uses it to great effect in Shakespeare's play, frightening his stepfather Claudius through the mystery of his behavior. The mysterious makes your forces seem larger, your power more terrifying. In the beginning of your rise to the top, you must attract attention at all cost. But as you rise higher, you must constantly adapt. Never wear the public out with the same tactic. An air of mystery works wonders for those who need to develop an aura of power and get themselves noticed, but it must seem measured and under control. Mata Hari went too far with her fabrications. Although the accusation that she was a spy was false, at the time it was a reasonable presumption, because all her lies made her seem suspicious and nefarious. Don't let your air of mystery be slowly transformed into a reputation for deceit. The mystery you create must seem a game, playful and unthreatening. Recognize when it goes too far and pull back. There are times when the need for attention must be deferred, and when scandal and notoriety are the last things you want to create. The attention you attract must never offend or challenge the reputation of those above you, not, at any rate, if they are secure. You will seem not only paltry, but desperate by comparison. There is an art to knowing when to draw notice and when to withdraw. Lola Montez was one of the great practitioners of the art of attracting attention. She managed to rise from a middle-class Irish background to being the lover of Franz Liszt, and then the mistress and political advisor of King Ludwig of Bavaria. In her later years, though, she lost her sense of proportion. In London in 1850, there was to be a performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth, featuring the greatest actor of the time, Charles John Keane. Everyone of consequence in English society was to be there. It was rumored that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were to make a public appearance. The custom of the period demanded that everyone be seated before the Queen arrived. So the audience got there a little early, and when the Queen entered her royal box, they observed the convention of standing up and applauding her. The royal couple waited, then bowed. Everyone sat down, and the lights were dimmed. Then, suddenly, all eyes turned to a box opposite Queen Victoria's. A woman appeared from the shadows, taking her seat later than the Queen. It was Lola Montez. She wore a diamond tiara on her dark hair and a long fur coat over her shoulders. People whispered in amazement as the ermine cloak was dropped to reveal a low-necked gown of crimson velvet. By turning their heads, the audience could see that the royal couple deliberately avoided looking at Lola's box. They followed Victoria's example, and for the rest of the evening, Lola Montez was ignored. After that evening, no one in fashionable society dared to be seen with her. All her magnetic powers were reversed. People would flee her sight. Her future in England was finished. Never appear overly greedy for attention, then, for it signals insecurity, and insecurity drives power away. Understand that there are times when it is not in your interest to be the center of attention. When in the presence of a king or queen, for instance, or the equivalent thereof, bow and retreat to the shadows. Never compete.
You will hear a conversation between a student and a job advisor.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Is this, room number 26?
Yes, that's right.
So, is this the student job centre?
It certainly is. How can I help you?
Well, actually, I'm looking for a job. A part-time job. Do you have anything available at the moment?
Yes. Are you a registered student? I'm afraid this service is only available to full-time students.
Yes, I am. I'm doing a degree in business studies. Here's my student card.
Which year are you in?
Well, I've been at uni for 4 years, but I'm in the 3rd year because I took last year off.
Right. Well, let's just have a look at what positions are available at the moment. There's a job working at the reception desk at the sports centre for 3 evenings a week. That's Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays.
That sounds like fun, but unfortunately I have evening lectures, so that's not possible, I'm afraid. Is there anything during the day?
OK, that's no good then. What about cleaning? There's a position for a cleaner at the childcare centre.
Right.
But you'd need to be there at 6 a.m. Does that appeal?
6 o'clock in the morning? Ooh, that's far too early for me, I'm afraid. I'd never make it that early in the morning.
Well, there was a position going in the computer lab for 3 days a week that might be okay. Here it is. No, it's in the library, not the lab. Clerical assistant required. I think it mostly involves putting the books back on the shelves. Oh no, hang on. It's for Wednesday and Friday evenings again.
No, I can't manage that because of the lectures.
OK, I'm getting the idea. Look, I'll just get a few details from you anyway, and then we can check through the list and see what comes up. We'll fill in the personal details on this application form first, if that's OK.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, what's your name again?
Anita Newman. That's Newman.
And your address, Anita?
I'm in one of the halls of residence for postgraduate students. You know, International House.
OK, that's easy. What's your room number there?
Room B569. No, sorry, B659. I always get that wrong. I haven't been living there very long.
Do you have any other skills? Typing, languages, that sort of thing?
Well, I speak some Japanese.
Right, I'll make a note of that. Now, let's see what else is available. What do you think of administrative work? There's a position for an office assistant at the English Language Centre.
That sounds interesting.
It's for 3 days a week, Monday, Friday and Saturday mornings. Interested?
I was hoping to have Saturdays free, but I need the work, so... Can you tell me what the job involves?
Yep, sure. It says here that you'll be required to deal with student inquiries and answer the phone.
I'm sure I can handle all that without a problem.
Great. Well, would you like me to arrange an interview for you? Say Friday morning around 10?
Can we make it a bit later? Unfortunately, I've got something to do at 10. Would that be okay?
Not a problem. How about 11:30? Hope it works out for you, Anita.
Me too. And thanks for all your help.
Sharpen your skills with this next listening session. Listen closely and snag every new word that floats by. Let's master your vocabulary. Unsheathe your inner voice and practice pronouncing each word. Craft a short sentence to acquire its meaning and lock it in your memory. Let's unleash your vocabulary potential.
You will hear a talk given by a group offering a walking holiday to raise money for charity.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to have been invited along to your club to talk about our charity-sponsored walking holiday for education aid. I'll start by giving you a brief overview of what it entails. First of all, let me explain what we mean by sponsored here. This is where people promise to donate money to the charity if you achieve your goal, in this case to walk a certain number of miles. Basically, we are organising a 10-day holiday from the 6th to the 16th of November, with 8 days actual walking, trekking in the Samira Mountains. Let's have a look at some of the details. We require you to raise sponsorship money of at least $3,200, paying $250 of it up front as a deposit, and the rest in stages throughout the year. Out of this, about 35% will go on your expenses, and that leaves 65% guaranteed to go to the charity. Which brings me to the most important part. This trek is being specifically organised to help education in the Samira region. Last year we helped train teachers for the disabled, and this year we're focusing on the pupils. Each of the walkers' sponsorship money will go to help an individual special needs pupil in one of the mountain schools. In the second part of the talk, I'll be giving you a lot more details. But back to the basic information. Age limits. This is the second time we've run this kind of holiday, and on the first we even had an 80-year-old. But we found it was wise to establish limits this time. You have to be at least 18, and the top limit is now 70, though you need to obtain a health certificate from your doctor if you are over 60 years old. Now, the Samira Mountains are among the highest in the world, but you mustn't be too daunted. We will mainly be trekking in the foothills only, although there will be spectacular views even in the foothills. However, you will need to be extremely fit if you aren't now and you're interested in coming with us. You have plenty of time to get into shape. You'll be sleeping in tents, so you must have quite a bit of equipment with you, but you will be helped by local assistants. Your bedding and so forth will be carried by them. We ask that you only walk with a small rucksack with needs for the day. I don't think I've really said enough about the marvellous area you'll be walking in. Let's have a look at some of the sights you'll be seeing. Apart from these spectacular snow-covered peaks and valleys, there are marvellous historic villages. The area has been famous for centuries for making beautiful carpets, although recently there has been a trend to move into weaving blankets and wood carving. The people are extremely friendly and welcoming. We deliberately keep the party small in size to minimise disruption to people and landscape. I hope that there are still some people interested. I will be distributing leaflets at the end where you can find out more information. But just for the moment, I'll outline the itinerary, the main high points of the holiday. Obviously, you'll start by flying out to Kishbar, the capital city, on day 1. After a couple of days to acclimatise yourself, you'll start the trek on day 3, walking through the enormous Katiba forest, which will take the whole of the day. Day 4 takes us higher up, going through the foothills, past a number of villages, and visiting a school for the disabled in Sohan. Then you have a rest day, that's day 5, before going to the spectacular Kumi Temple, with 12th century carvings, set in a small forest by a lake, and that's day 6, the highlight for many. We stay near there for day 7, because then comes the hardest day, walking through very mountainous country, but culminating in a swim in the Partey Falls. This is the highest waterfall in the region. Day 9 is much easier, with part of the day spent in a village where they make some of the gorgeous red blankets. Then back down to Kishbar and the journey home. So, you can see it's a pretty packed timetable.
You will hear part of a seminar on ocean research given by a climate scientist.
Thanks to all of you for coming along today to hear about how the Robotic Float project is helping with ocean research. Well, first of all, we'll look at what a robotic float does and its use. So let's start with the device itself. It looks a bit like a cigar, and it's about 1.5 meters long. More importantly, it's full of equipment that's designed to collect data. So it can help us in building up a profile of different factors which work together within the world's oceans.
Sounds like a big project. Isn't it too big for one country to undertake?
That's quite true, but this project is a really good example of international cooperation. Over the last 5 years, scientists from 13 countries have been taking part in the project and launching floats in their area of ocean control. And next year this number will rise to 14 when Indonesia joins the project.
That's impressive.
But let's move on to how floats work. The operational cycle goes like this. Each of the floats is dropped in the ocean from a boat at a set point and activated from a satellite. Then the float immediately sinks about 2,000 meters. That's 2 whole kilometers down in the water. It stays at this depth for about 10 days and is carried around by the currents which operate in the ocean at this level. During this time, it's possible for it to cover quite large distances, but the average is 50 kilometers.
So, what is it actually recording?
Well, at this stage, nothing. But as it rises to the surface, it collects all sorts of data. Most importantly, variations in salinity, that's salt levels, and the changes in temperature, a bit like underwater weather balloons. Then, when it gets back to the surface, all the data it's collected is beamed up to the satellite. After about 5 hours on the surface, the float automatically sinks, beginning the whole process again.
What happens to the data?
Well, the information is transferred direct to onshore meteorological stations, like our one in Hobart, and within 4 hours the findings can be on computers, and they can be mapped and analysed.
You say you're building models of the world's ocean systems, but how are they going to be used? And more importantly, when?
Some of the data has already helped in completing projects. For example, our understanding of the underlying causes of El Niño events is being confirmed by float data. Another way we're using float data is to help us to understand the mechanics of climate change, like global warming and ozone depletion. That's part of an ongoing variability study, but the results are still a long way off. However, this is not the case with our ocean weather forecasting. Because we know from the floats what the prevailing weather conditions will be in certain parts of the ocean, we can advise the Navy on search and rescue missions. That's happening right now, and many yachtsmen owe their lives to the success of this project. In addition, the float data can help us to look at the biological implications of ocean processes.
Would that help with preserving fish stocks?
Yes, and advising governments on fisheries legislation. We're well on the way to completing a project on this. We hope it will help to bring about more sustainable fishing practices. We'll be seeing the results of that quite soon.
It sounds like the data from floats has lots of applications.
Yes, it does. It's also a powerful agricultural tool. If we were aware of what the weather would be like, say, next year, we could make sure that the farmers planted appropriate grain varieties to produce the best yield from the available rainfall.
That sounds a bit like science fiction, especially when now we can't even tell them when a drought will break.
I agree that this concept is still a long way in the future, but it will come eventually, and the float data will have made a contribution.
Cocaine in the Caribbean. Keeping it in the family. European territories in the Caribbean have become drug smuggling hotspots.
Back when the United States was the world's hottest market for cocaine, the drug was flown into places like Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, then taken to Florida by boat. Today, the fiercest demand for cocaine comes from Europe, where its wholesale price is some 40% higher than in the United States. To meet this demand, smugglers have woven a different set of Caribbean islands into their supply chains, Europe's overseas territories. The French departments of Martinique, Guadeloupe and French Guiana are particularly useful because they are part of the European Union, thus easing access to Europe. Getting into them, particularly French Guiana, is easy too. Smugglers passing through Suriname, a former Dutch colony, can bypass corrupt police at the Moroni River on the border with French Guiana, according to Insight Crime, an investigative outfit in Washington. Finding mules to take cocaine onto Europe is not hard either. French Guiana is poor compared with metropolitan France. Bagging €7,000, that's $7,600 for a 17-hour round trip is tempting, even though the odds of detection are fairly high. French police denied boarding to almost 10,000 passengers suspected of being mules in the year to November 2023. But most of Europe's cocaine comes by sea. A seizure on March 18th by authorities at the French port of Le Havre, 2.7 tons of cocaine shipped from Guadeloupe, was typical. Over half the cocaine seized in metropolitan France in 2022 came from its Caribbean territories. The picture is similar in other European territories. Britain's Caribbean possessions, including the British Virgin Islands, or BVI, are a launchpad for coke-laden yachts heading to both sides of the Atlantic. Arrivals from Curaçao, a poor island in the Dutch Caribbean, and Suriname, whose Dutch community makes up roughly half the population, accounted for 63% of all cocaine seized from passengers at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport in 2023. The Dutch authorities will spend €61 million this year patrolling their Caribbean territories. This growing trade has had dire consequences. The prison population in France's overseas territories rose by 47% between 2013 and 2023, in part because of drug arrests. The Caribbean now has one of the world's highest proportions of people in drug treatment from cocaine use. Several mules have died after ingested cocaine pellets burst in their guts. Drug-related violence troubles weak island states. Drugs feed corruption too. In February, a court in Miami found a former premier of the BVI guilty of drug trafficking. What to do? Efforts to boost port security can go only so far without hurting commerce, says David Caunter of Interpol. Less than 2% of shipping containers worldwide are inspected. Identity checks on travellers from French Guiana have reduced the amount of cocaine reaching mainland France, but they have also raised concerns about racial profiling. In any case, traffickers tend merely to shift traffic to Martinique and Guadeloupe. That is not surprising. French Guiana's mule traffic took off only after the Dutch tightened screening procedures for passengers travelling from Suriname to Amsterdam, says Thierry Nicolas of the University of French Guiana. The United States is by far the most powerful drug buster in the Caribbean, but the European territories lack muscle. CARICOM Impacts, a regional security body, struggles to get funds. Limited cooperation from poor Caribbean states weakens international security operations. It is extremely difficult to get help and accurate facts in investigations from other Caribbean states. Clarice Tarrant, the public prosecutor at Martinique's main port, told the French Senate in December. European countries where most of the cocaine ends up could benefit from putting more resources into the region. The EU is estimated to spend only around a third as much as the United States on supply-side reduction. During his visit to French Guiana on March 25th, his first in more than 6 years, Emmanuel Macron, France's president, faced renewed criticism for his government's insufficient funding of security. At the same time, European governments must tread carefully. Their directives can seem arrogant to their Caribbean residents. Local premiers expressed alarm in January when the unelected representative of the British government at the BVI sought extended powers in order to implement governance reforms. Yet, without Europe's help, the Caribbean will continue to suffer the consequences of being a conduit for the world's most voracious cocaine market.
You will hear part of a lecture about hotels and the tourist industry.
Today's lecture forms part of the Hospitality and Tourism module. Last week, I looked at the economy end of the hotel business. This week, I'm going to discuss the luxury end of the market. Let's consider the following scenario. You wake up in the middle of the night in a strange hotel miles away from home, disoriented most probably from jet lag, when even the most expensive surroundings can seem empty and dispiriting. You have paid a great deal of money to stay in this first-class hotel with its contemporary technology, but according to recent research carried out by an international travel and public relations company, all is not well. The research suggests that even the most opulent, luxurious hotels seem to have underestimated the most basic needs of their customers, be they traveling for work or pleasure. The need to feel at home in surroundings which are both familiar and inviting. Do these findings, however, apply only to hotels situated in particular areas? Is it possible that the external environment can affect a guest's well-being? The company's research covered a whole range of different hotel types, both independent hotels and those which are part of large chains. They investigated chic, so-called boutique hotels in the heart of downtown business districts, stately mansions located in the depths of beautiful countryside, and plush hotels built at the edge of tropical beaches, surrounded by palm trees and idyllic blue ocean. And the research concluded that what was outside the hotel building simply didn't matter. This is a fascinating revelation, and those of you hoping to move into careers in the travel and leisure industry would be well advised to look at the findings in more detail. But back to the main point of this lecture, the need to feel at home. What can the hotel industry do about it? And is the very idea so subjective that it's impossible to do anything about it on a global basis? However, nothing stands still in this world. One company has come up with the slogan, "Take your home with you," and aims to provide clients with luxury serviced apartments. Those in the business travel industry maintain that these serviced apartments dispense with all the unwanted and expensive hotel services that business travelers don't want, while maximizing the facilities they do want. For example, not only sleeping and living accommodation, but also a sleek, modern kitchen that allows guests to cook and entertain, if they wish, at no additional cost. The attractions of such facilities are obvious, and it'll be interesting to see whether the company manages to establish a trend all over the world and make a lasting impact on the luxury accommodation market. Now, finally, I want to consider the psychology underpinning the traditional holiday hotel industry. As a hotelier, how do you go about attracting people to give up the security of their own home and entrust themselves to staying in a completely strange place and sleeping in an unfamiliar bed? Firstly, hotels exploit people's need to escape the predictability of their everyday lives. For a few days, people can pretend they are free of responsibilities and can indulge themselves. Secondly, there is something very powerful in our need to be pampered and looked after. It's almost as if we returned to being a baby when everything was done for us and we felt safe and secure. And not far removed from this is the pleasure in being spoilt and given little treats, like the minuscule bottles of shampoo and tiny bars of soap, the chocolate on your pillow at night. And we actually forget that we are paying for it all. Next week, I'm going to look at eco-hotels, a fairly new phenomenon, but increasingly popular.
Listen carefully to next session. Get ready for a vocabulary boost. Listen attentively and capture every new word you hear. Practice pronouncing each word and craft a short sentence to lock its meaning in your mind. Let's unlock your vocabulary potential.
Salted, buttered, covered in caramel, sprinkled with cinnamon, paprika, chocolate. So many ways to top a great snack. Popcorn is an irresistible treat that is many centuries old and is enjoyed today by people all around the world. But who were the first ones to savor it? And how did it become so popular? Well, its yummy smell probably helped. The history of popcorn is deeply linked to the American continent and the peoples who inhabited it. In fact, archaeologists discovered traces of popcorn there that were about 5,600 years old. Corn was essential in the pre-Columbian indigenous societies of America, and not only as food, they also used it for decorating clothes and in ritual ceremonies. Both the Mayans and the Aztecs worshipped maize gods and goddesses, which they associated with abundance and prosperity. Myths around the death and rebirth of gods were connected to the change of the seasons and the production of corn, which was their main food source. The Mayans also believed that their ancestors were made from maize dough. When French explorers arrived in the New World, they witnessed the Iroquois Indians, who lived in the Great Lakes region. Popcorn kernels in jars filled with heated sand. By then, popcorn was widely eaten in Native American tribes. They ate it as a snack, but also with milk and sugar, just like a breakfast cereal. Colonists soon developed a taste for popcorn, which they liked to cook with molasses, making a treat very similar to today's kettle corn. By the mid-19th century, popcorn had become a favorite snack among people of all backgrounds and ages. In the 1890s, a man called Charles Creters, who owned a candy store, was looking for a more effective peanut roaster. He designed a new steam-powered machine that could be used both to roast peanuts and to pop corn, thus inventing the first commercial popcorn machine. He installed it in a horse-drawn wagon and took to the streets. Popcorn vendors soon became extremely popular, strategically placing themselves near crowds in fairs, markets, and especially outside theaters. This way, popcorn became the favorite snack of cinema-goers. In 1981, microwave popcorn was invented, and the consumption of popcorn at home skyrocketed. Studies say that every American eats 39 kilos of popcorn every year.
Everyone likes to listen to their friends or family tell funny stories. If you go to a club or theatre and pay to hear someone do the same thing, it's called stand-up. Something similar has existed in Britain and the US for more than a century and a half, but years ago it had a different name. People went to a music hall to see singers or people doing magic and circus tricks, especially in London. Men, women, and even children performed in front of large audiences. This is how Charlie Chaplin started acting at the age of 5, before he became famous in the film industry. When radio and cinema became more popular, these theatres closed, but stand-up continued in smaller clubs in towns and cities in Britain. Music was often mixed with comedy, and some of these performers became very successful on television. For one Christmas show with the double act Morecambe and Wise, around 28 million people were watching, half the population of the UK at the time. Near the end of the 20th century, a new generation of clubs opened in London, which were less traditional. They helped start the careers of female stand-up comedians. Today, there are even comedy festivals in different parts of the world, and not just in English-speaking countries. So why is stand-up still so popular? Perhaps, like football, it is not very complicated. You don't need any expensive equipment or teams of people behind the stage, like most other arts. All that is required is a performer with a microphone and an audience with a sense of humor. What could be simpler?
We'll see you next time for more exciting and helpful videos to help you master your speaking fluency through our listening sessions. Thank you for being with us.